Texas State officially announced as a member of the new Pac-12. Congrats to the people in San Marcos. Also, now that that's over, we can focus on the really big fight, the mediation and litigation going on between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West. I'm going to break it all down for you. This is the Let's Run podcast. Hey guys, welcome into the show today. I want to thank you for checking out the channel. We are barreling up the subscriber counts. The views are great. The comments are great. I have always said that I will respond to every single comment on all of my videos. Having kind of a tough time because of the way that YouTube collects those comments, or I guess like organizes them for you. It's kind of hard to see all of them. I'm trying to respond to all of them across all the videos, but I want to make sure that you guys have your voice heard. If you want to talk to me directly, please email me. My email is in the description below. And please, the subscribers are amazing. I appreciate you guys subscribing to the channel. Please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Let me know that you've done those things. Let me know your opinions on this. This will be kind of an interesting episode. I kind of didn't do the whole Texas State announcement video thing, mostly because it's Texas State fans' moment. And congrats to them. They are a school that hasn't been in the FBS that long. They had been a very good FCS school. They move up to the FBS. They had joined the Sun Belt Conference. Recently, they're showing a lot of good signs and a lot of good progression. I think that Pac-12 people probably overstated how, not all of them, I think a lot of them are pretty level-headed about it, but many of them maybe overstated the significance of the addition. But I also feel like Mountain West people are also a little too dismissive of Texas State, simply because UNLV, we really only have 2 good years of football progress to show for people in the last 10 or 15 years or so. And the same goes for Texas State. And so, people will look at their record and say, oh, they're not that good of an ad. Ultimately, they're the ad because they play football, because they're willing to be a full member. And they have a big student base. And are they going to change the world for the Pac-12? No. Are they going to be the best school in the Pac-12 in terms of on-field performance? No. Are they going to really struggle probably in basketball? Yeah. And in football, to be honest. But there are some very good people that I've talked to in San Marcos, and they're very happy about it. And ultimately, they're the winners. And all the other parties, I don't think we should take our ire out on Texas State, because the real fight is in the mediation and the litigation going on between the two conferences. And so I wanted to, because I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding about specifically the mediation terms, what's being argued, what are the arguments by both sides. They've been in mediation for, I guess, a month and 9 days, so 5 weeks now. But that mediation has not been continuous. There has been a break. Essentially, and this is what was reported. There's a gag order on the mediation, so we don't know specifically kind of what's going on inside the room. The longer it goes on, the better sign for a deal, probably. If we heard that mediation ended without a deal, that would be bad. But the thing is, neither party can actually afford to go to court. So yes, it's a good sign that mediation is still ongoing. But because of the way that these exit fees and poaching penalties could be construed in court, neither party wants to go to court and can go to court. So the fact that they're still in mediation, it could be a good sign. It is a good sign. But at the same time, I wouldn't read too much into that, meaning that they're approaching a deal, because neither party can actually literally go to court. I mean, they could, but it is such a bad solution to actually go to court to dispute this for both parties, because the Mountain West needs money now, and the Pac-12 can't risk, actually having to pay the entire exit and poaching fee penalties and the timelines, and they don't want their money tied up in litigation either. And if the party loses, you could see attorney's fees being charged to the other party, and so they have to come to a solution here. And I think it's more difficult than people are giving it credit for. And so I wanted to break it down for you. I'm going to pull up a slideshow, my favorite thing to do, and we're going to break it down. And we're going to go through the timeline. We're going to go through arguments for both sides. And I'm just going to try and keep it very simple. Again, I'm not an attorney yet. I did graduate from law school. I'm studying for the bar right now. So don't take this all with a slight grain of salt. I'm not an expert in the field or anything, but I have followed this very closely. And sports litigation is easily the topic that interests me most. And what I spent the majority of my law school time studying was NIL stuff. Student compensation. Um, I've been very interested in basically every aspect of this. So I've studied a lot and I've read a lot into it, and take my opinions with a grain of salt. But I feel like I can provide a decent understanding for this. So let's present my screen here. This won't be a super long video. If you'd like, I can do a whole mock court thing again, where I do. Where I essentially act as the lawyer for both parties. That might be kind of fun for an episode. But let's share the screen. Let's get the presentation going. Boop boop boop. Here we go. Let's go up here. And it's not a super in-depth presentation, but I just wanted to explain it to people so that they could understand the arguments by both sides, the timelines, and what I ultimately think could come out of this mediation. So let's start with the timeline. The first event, well, I guess I should have put, the first event was the original Pac-12 kind of dying. That happened in early 2023, the early 2023 football season, I believe. It basically, for about a year and a half, it was pretty clear that the Pac-12 was dying, or the schools in the Pac-12 had already decided they were going to leave. I think the USC UCLA thing happened in 2023, like January or something, and that kind of set off a cascade where the Pac-12 kind of disintegrated and just kind of died. But for the purposes of our parties in this case, let's talk about 2023. And I believe this was early December 2023. So it was like December 2nd. The Mountain West amends its bylaws. So the Mountain West the Mountain West didn't originally have a traditional grant of rights, but it early on in the 2020s, it kind of established that. And in 2023, they amended their bylaws after the Pac-12. It became clear that the Pac-12 was disintegrating. Now, why did they do this? They did this because they didn't want the Pac-12 schools to poach them. I do not know if this amending was unanimous. I don't know if I don't know if it needs to be unanimous, to be honest with you. I think it's a 3/4 vote, because with a 3/4 vote, you can vote to, disintegrate or basically disband the conference. And so I think it's a 3/4 vote. It could be a 50% vote. But, if there are 12 members with voting rights, or 11 or 12 members with voting rights in the Mountain West, that would mean that 7 or 8 of them at least agreed to amend the bylaws. They basically doubled the exit fees to roughly $18 million per school with more than a year notice, and $36 million per school with less than a year's notice to leave the conference. Now, schools agreed to this. That was kind of the first step. And I don't know if it was unanimous. I don't know how it was voted on, but enough members voted that the conference essentially came to the agreement that it was $18 million to leave with more than a year's notice, and $36 million to leave with less than a year's notice. The other thing that they also said is that members must deliver a notice of resignation. And the notice of resignation is essentially, if you remember July 1st, that was when the Pac-12, or June 1st, I think, that was when the Pac-12 schools, the new Pac-12 schools, officially gave their notice to the Mountain West. And that's a very important legal mechanism, which is basically like they pay like a $5,000 fee, and they send in an official letter that they are resigning their membership status from the conference. And we'll get into that a bit more later, because that's part of the whole dispute here. But shortly after the Mountain West, so I believe this is actually after, so it was probably the poaching agreement and the scheduling agreement between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West was after the Mountain West amended its bylaws. So I think I might have the date there wrong. But early December 2023, the Mountain West and the Pac-12 sign a scheduling agreement. The scheduling agreement paid the Mountain West, I believe, $14 million per year. And it was set up to essentially protect the Mountain West through 2027 with these poaching penalties. And basically what it stated is that if Washington State and Oregon State, the Pac-12, I mean, they basically retain their legal status as the Pac-12, Washington State and Oregon State. If they were to poach Mountain West schools, it would cost about $11 million per school that they poached, and the Mountain West schools would still be responsible for exit fees on top of that. So the Pac-12 signed this scheduling agreement, agreeing to poaching penalties after the Mountain West had amended its bylaws to increase the exit fees. And so uh, they could renew it year on or year off. It wasn't like a guaranteed 4-year contract. And they came to this agreement so that the Pac 12 could have schools to play in football. And, it was the Pac 12 was kind of in a tough spot. Washington State and Oregon State were kind of in a tough spot. Going independent is incredibly expensive. You are basically scheduling all of your games. You have no reliable travel partners. It's very difficult for schools to do that. And so Washington State and Oregon State kind of found themselves in a position where it just would have been incredibly costly for them and very difficult for them to do anything except for sign the scheduling agreement with the Mountain West. But they did sign it. They signed it. They knew the contents of it when they signed it. And it was after the Mountain West bylaws had been amended. And this was all basically a legal effort to protect the Mountain West from being destroyed. And specifically, I believe, to try and basically force the Pac-12 and Oregon State and Washington State into a merger with the Mountain West. Now, obviously, that effort failed, but they tried to make the legal penalties so great that the Pac-12 would have no option but to merge with the Mountain West. But you have to understand the Pac-12, Oregon State and Washington State, and the leadership of the Pac-12 had just come off a great victory against the departing members of the Pac-12 in court. They were arguing and disputing over distributions, and there was basically like a $200 million dispute between Oregon State and Washington State and the departing members of the Pac-12, and Oregon State and Washington State won that lawsuit and kept those assets. And so they had just come off a great court victory, and so perhaps they entered into the agreement thinking, yeah, this is all baloney. We'll sign this now because we don't really have another option. But if these guys want to try and actually enforce this, we'll take them to court, which is exactly what they did. So September 2nd, 2024, the Mountain West and Pac-12 failed to extend the agreement to the 2025 season. So the scheduling agreement only lasts 1 year. Early on in the season, basically, the conferences were essentially negotiating with each other. The Pac-12 didn't want to take all of the Mountain West schools. They only wanted to take the schools that they wanted. The Mountain West was saying, hey, you got to take all of our schools. Apparently, the Mountain West reached out and tried to split apart Oregon State and Washington State. They reached out directly to Washington State to try and lure Washington State into the Mountain West with significant financial incentives. Essentially, the Mountain West was just trying to strong arm the Pac-12 into doing what it wanted. And the Pac-12 said no. And that is why the scheduling agreement that was originally signed was not extended. And so the scheduling agreement ends in 2024. Now, it's still technically had its legal powers, the poaching powers, all the way to 2027, but the scheduling agreement was not renewed. Next step, September 12th. The Pac-12 adds 4 Mountain West schools, SDSU, Boise, Colorado State, and Fresno State. And then shortly after that adds Utah State. The schools publicly announced their plans to join the Pac-12, but do not submit their official notice. Then, and there's a step here that we'll talk about in just a second that happened right after this. That happened late September, early October. But we'll talk about kind of what happened in just a second. Then, December 12th, 2024, the Mountain West signs a grant of rights. They have added NIU, UTEP, I think by this point. And in this grant of rights, the initial 61% or $61 million, of exit fees are distributed to its members. If the Mountain West can get to $65 million, UNLV and Air Force receive $14 million. Reno, New Mexico, San Jose State, Wyoming, they get about $7 million, and Hawaii gets about $3 million. And the grant of rights is binding in preparation for the Mountain West to take its schools to market its media rights. December 16th, 2024, Utah State, Colorado State, Boise State, they all sue the Mountain West over the exit fees, and the Pac-12 is refusing to pay the poaching penalties. Finally, Due to both sides agreeing to extend the start of mediation till then, mediation begins on May 19th, 2025. I have no idea why the parties couldn't get to mediation faster than this. They really needed to. They should have been in mediation in March, in my opinion, or February. I don't know why these parties knew the parties knew this legal stuff way before then. Now, there may be some, mechanism that I'm not aware of that prevented them from going to litigation until, I guess, yeah, litigation is the right word to use. But they start their mediation May 19th, 2025, and here we are. So I want to break down the arguments made by the Mountain West, essentially. And one thing you have to understand is that a lot of this comes from before the mediation actually started. The mediator is a retired judge of some sort, apparently. We don't know who he is. His identity is secret, I guess. And so a lot of this stuff comes from before the mediation, and there has been a gag order, which basically means none of the parties inside the mediation can talk about what's going on inside the mediation. And so, there were some initial reports that mediation was going well, but we haven't really heard anything in a while. And again, I think that's because they took a break. They basically went back, and now that Texas State is added, I expect things to get full-fledged again. A timeline for this, I don't know. I mean, it has to be resolved before, mid-August, but you could see this mediation thing drag all the way into late July. You could see it resolved next week. We just don't know. But here's what the Mountain West is arguing. So they're arguing that the Pac-12 entered into a valid contract with the Mountain West. Now, in order to enter into a valid contract, you have to have both parties that are making promises to do something. The contract has to have consideration, has to have promises by both parties, and the contract also can't be unenforceable based on public policy rules or be as the result of some, unconscionable act by one party or the other party. So the Mountain West is arguing that this is a valid contract, that the contract is not illegal, which I'll get into a little bit when I talk about the Pac-12's argument, that the Pac-12 did not enter into this contract under duress, that the Pac-12 entered into it fully knowing what its terms were and that it was a legal contract and enforceable. Exit fees are basically, in the next point, exit fees are essentially, every conference has them. They're conference protection. And every conference has exit fees. Exit fees are paid essentially every time a school leaves a conference. And so the fees basically ensure that the Mountain West isn't destabilized by schools leaving. The Mountain West is its own distinct legal entity and therefore has the right to protect itself from litigation, even if the schools, while they're a part of it, aren't necessarily in the exact same party. The bylaws were lawfully changed in 2023, and all schools, this is the important part for the Mountain West, all schools were present when the bylaws were changed in 2023. The conference agreed to, by and according to its laws, agreed to amend its bylaws to up the exit fees. And every member, even the Mountain West 5 that are departing the conference, was present at that time. Again, the Mountain West has loyalty incentives to keep UNLV and Air Force, and even the other schools too. It's not just UNLV and Air Force getting money from the conference, it's all the other schools in the conference too. And so essentially the Mountain West is saying the Pac-12 took the risk. They knew the rules. They chose to recruit Mountain West schools anyway. They signed the poaching agreement after the Mountain West amended its bylaws. It's a valid contract, and that's it. Let's jump on over to the Pac-12 side now. So the Pac-12 arguments are interesting. Essentially, they are that it's an anti-competitive clause. Now, what does that mean? Antitrust litigation essentially boils down to the idea in the early 1900s, big oil companies were essentially collaborating with each other to all raise their prices above what they should be. And basically, you don't want parties getting into agreements with each other that damage free market trade and fair competition. And the Pac-12 is arguing that the poaching penalties and honestly the exit fees are anti-competitive. It's a free market open system. Schools should be allowed to be paid what they're worth. Schools shouldn't have unreasonable restraints on trade. the viability of this argument is going to be interesting because I'm not really sure what the thing that they're claiming. Well, a lot of people will bring up the ACC and Florida State and Clemson trying to get out of that ACC grant of rights that went all the way till 2036. Uh, the difference here is that the Mountain West grant of rights ended in 2026 anyway. And so, yes, I understand that the antitrust route hasn't gone well for a school like Florida State or Clemson, but it's not the exact same situation here. The timelines are different. The grant of rights ends in 2026, and essentially, and so basically, I don't think it's fair to say, well, Florida State and Clemson couldn't use the antitrust lawsuit, couldn't use an antitrust argument in their lawsuit, and therefore, these Pac-12 schools can't use the antitrust argument either. Um, and I feel like I don't really know how successful that argument's going to be, but it could be. The sign under duress argument is very interesting. I don't think that this holds nearly as much water because clearly Washington State and Oregon State signed the argument knowing that they were going to try and get out of it. I don't see duress as an actual element here, and I don't know why a court would listen to that. I don't think duress is. I think the contract being illegal has a much stronger basis in law than duress being a condition under which the contract was signed. This is kind of something that I think is interesting. So the secret exit fee changes. So after the Mountain West schools, the Mountain West Five, um, notified the conference that they were going to be leaving. Well, they didn't notify the conference officially, but it was stated in public that these 5 schools were going to be leaving. Supposedly, allegedly, um, the Mountain West remaining schools got together and, without the consent of the schools that announced publicly that they were leaving, changed it so that they started withholding their media and conference payout distributions immediately. Now, normally, you'd have to wait until official notice is given before you can start doing that. Now, official notice in the Mountain West is a $5,000 fee and a document that you send into the league office stating that you're leaving the conference. Now, these Mountain West schools are saying, well, they announced they're leaving for the Pac-12 anyway. Even though they haven't followed the procedure, there's constructive notice. We know that they're leaving because they said that they're leaving, and even if they haven't sent in the $5,000 fee, we know that they're leaving anyway. And so the Mountain West immediately began withholding its revenue from these schools, which is really difficult for these schools because they need that revenue to operate, and did so without the presence of the 5 schools that announced that they were leaving. And the 5 schools that announced that they were leaving were saying, hey, we haven't given official notice yet. We have a right to be in this meeting. And the remaining Mountain West schools, did it anyway. So is the Pac-5, the Pac-5 or the Mountain West 5 schools left for the Pac-12, is them saying publicly they're going to leave for the Pac-12 enough to override their rights as members of the conference, even if they haven't officially given notice? I think this is a really strong argument for the Pac-12, mostly because, if you want to try and argue that 2023 amending of the Mountain West bylaws is, binding and great, that Mountain West bylaws also stated that you're a member of the conference until you give official notice. And the Mountain West didn't have the right to withhold distributions and payouts to these schools without them giving notice. And so that is why the Mountain West's 5 schools that are leaving the conference waited until, June 1st to officially give notice, because it's part of their legal argument that they shouldn't have, been withheld their revenue. And essentially they're saying, the Mountain West is acting really shady here. I mean, they're basically going against principles of free trade, trying to keep themselves alive. And again, these side deals, the promised exit fees to Lovett, I mean, all of this was done in private as well, without the consent of the members that still had not given their notice under the terms of the Mountain West bylaws that every single school in the Mountain West agreed with. Promising $25 million to a school that hasn't done anything to earn that besides just stay in the conference, and using exit fee payouts and withheld distributions, essentially they're saying that this is kind of an issue of fairness. And, for the poaching fees, and this is another really strong point that the Pac 12 has, is that the exit fees are already a way for the Mountain West to recoup value from these schools leaving. And the Pac 12 is saying, hey, these poaching penalties, and if you know anything about contract law, the poaching penalties are essentially liquidated damages clauses. And for a liquidated damage clause, basically what that means is if one of the parties, fails to perform, there is a clause in a contract that says, well, if I'm buying a car from my brother and my brother doesn't bring the car to me, our contract could have a clause that says my brother will have to pay me $10,000 just because he didn't bring the car to me. Courts have looked at clauses like that and said, well, that's not really tied to any specific piece of value. And it's more just about punishing your brother's conduct than actually compensating you for the loss of what you think you deserve. If you want to go after your brother, go after him for damages for breaching the contract. There shouldn't be a liquidated damages penalty fee inside the contract. I do not see the Pac-12 having to pay very much, if any, of the poaching penalties, simply because it's penalizing the same conduct twice, and that does go against contract law. And realignment is lawful. Realignment's happening. Every single conference has had to deal with realignment, from the Big 12 to the Pac 12 being destroyed. Oregon State and Washington State basically were left out in the wilderness to die because of realignment. And so you don't get to enter into illegal contracts, to try and keep it from happening to you, because it's just the law of the land. Realignment happens. The WAC just died because of realignment. And trying to use these unenforceable legal mechanisms to try and keep that from happening to your conference is just unfair. And so there's some good arguments from the Pac-12. I think the double penalty thing is very strong. The Pac-12 is already, the schools are paying the conference to leave, and having the Pac-12 pay a fee on top of all of that is essentially penalizing the same conduct twice. I think that's pretty fair. I think the secret meeting without official notice having been given is kind of a really strong argument by the Pac-12. And you may be saying, especially if you're on the Mountain West side, you may be saying, hey, they agreed to all this. Now it looks like to me that the Mountain West also agreed to something, and didn't uphold their end of the bargain too, when they amended the bylaws without members who hadn't given official notice yet. But you may say, hey, they agreed to all this. Why is this fair? Why can't we just make them do what they promised to say that they were going to do? And the thing is, if contracts are illegal, courts will not enforce them. Here's an example, and it's one that I use all the time. If I am getting into a deal to buy illegal drugs from somebody, and I buy the illegal drugs and they come back and it turns out that it is Smarties. It's not the drug that I thought I was getting, but it's just a packet of Smarties. I can't go to the court and say, hey, I had a contract with this dude to buy an illegal drug. And then he broke the contract. Even if both of us agreed to it, the court's going to look at it and say the contract was illegal. It doesn't matter if both of you agreed to it. And so if the contract's illegal, it does not matter if both parties signed it. It doesn't matter if they signed it without duress. It doesn't matter the terms of what they signed it under. If the contract's illegal, the contract's illegal. And so, what's going to end up happening here? The Mountain West is essentially trying to withhold multiple years, 2 years of revenue instead of 1 year of revenue, because the Mountain West is saying, hey, you left the conference in October. We're going to start withholding revenue now. The Pac-12 schools are saying, if you're going to withhold revenue, you can only do it for 1 year because we haven't given notice that we're leaving the conference yet. And the PAC's basically going to try and use existing precedent that multiple years of withholding revenue isn't a way that that conference realignment has ever been done. I went through basically all of the instances of conference realignment. I went through every single school, when they left conferences, how those exit fees were paid. Generally, the way that the exit fees have been paid. UConn was a really good example of this when they left the AAC for the Big East. Looking at Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12. Generally, what happens is Schools are withheld 1 year of revenue before they leave the conference, not two, 1 year of revenue before they leave the conference. Um, in the Mountain West case, revenue is between $6 and $7 million. For Boise, it's around 8. There are 5 schools. It would be like 35 or 33 or $35 million of revenue. The Mountain West is essentially saying we're going to use these 2 years of withheld revenue payments to these Mountain West schools that are leaving us to pay schools that are staying. And I don't think that the Mountain West is going to be able to successfully argue that they should be able to withhold 2 years of revenue from these schools. I can't see it. I can't see it because that's just not the way that schools have been paid out in conference realignment. So what do I think will happen? I think that the Pac-12 will pay a nominal fee. Maybe not nominal is probably not the right word, but a small fee to the Mountain West for the poaching. I think there will be a small fee paid in mediation. The Pac-12 could probably say, well, we'll take this to court and we'll win and we'll pay zero. But they don't really want to do that because they don't want to pay attorney's fees and stuff. So they will pay a little bit of something for the poaching penalties. I think that'll probably be, I don't know, maybe $5 million, maybe $10 million. I mean, like a reasonable fee. $5 to $10 million would be my guess for the poaching penalties, just to give the Mountain West something so they don't have to go to court over it. As for the exit fees, generally exit fees, if they're paid out outside of just the conference withholding the revenue of the schools that are leaving, they're paid out over time. And so when SMU left the AAC to join the ACC, SMU is paying its $25 million payout over a course of like 10 years. They're paying a little bit each year to the AAC. And I think that the Mountain West schools will have a year of revenue withheld. So whatever the Mountain West schools would have made this coming year, they will all have withheld. I would think that's around $7 million per school, maybe $6 million per school. That would be $34 or $35 million. And then each school will probably pay something over time to the conference. And again, this is just my guess, guys. Each school will probably pay something over time to the conference, maybe $2 to $3 million more, which would put it at about $10 million per school, around $50 million. But it could be less than that. And it won't be paid as a lump sum. So I think the Mountain West will have something along the lines of $40 million to work with in kind of a lump sum payment, and then another maybe 10 paid out over time. So if we go back to the way that the grant of rights is, $61 million is owed to UNLV and Air Force, what basically 24.5% of whatever they can collect. So I think, this is just a guess, but I think a $40 million payment is going to be made, maybe a $45 million payment. UNLV and Air Force would be owed 245 times 40, around $9 million each. And the rest of the conferences would be owed. One sec, I'm just doing the math here. Times 40 would be owed around $4 million each. And Hawaii would be owed a nominal fee, something like $1 million or something. And so, that's a lot less money. And, this $14.945 million isn't all of the money that would be owed to UNLV and Air Force. They would also be technically, under the bylaw agreements, they would be paid out something like $1 million or $1.5 million on top of whatever media deal they get. The math just doesn't seem to work for me. And I wonder what kind of innovative solutions they're going to try and come up with. Previously, I talked about trading UNLV and the rest of the schools all taking equal shares, or maybe Air Force remains in its share, but all the rest of the schools have their shares upped. And maybe the Pac-12 would be willing to pay more in a liquid fee to the conference. But based on the financial promises that the Mountain West has made, and based on the media deal that the Mountain West is looking at, which we just don't know what it is yet, I just don't know that financially this makes a lot of sense. I don't. And while I do think that, there will be a $35 million bare minimum fee collected, how happy are the other schools in the Mountain West going to be about that outcome? How happy is the conference going to be about that outcome? I think we could be in for a long road. I don't see a scenario where both parties, could leave this situation happy. I really don't. The Pac-12 needs more than 8 members. It needs at least a ninth member. The Mountain West honestly needs another member. It needs a 10th or 11th member, just for scheduling um, conveniences for the schools. And so, Texas State joining the Pac-12, I think it's great, but I think that this fight is going to happen. And what do I think will happen ultimately? I think there's going to be something creative about it that we do not know yet. There is going to be some unanticipated factor that comes in the way that the agreement is created, whether that be a scheduling agreement, whether that be the Mountain West trading one of its schools to the Pac-12 for a higher payout and amending its bylaws, whether it be, it's not going to be a complete defeat because it's going to be settled in mediation. They're not going to go to court, but something creative is going to have to happen. And let me know your thoughts down below. I love this kind of stuff. I love breaking it down. This is just my passion, man. So I would kill to be in this in this mediation room, debating all this and talking about it, because I just think it's fascinating. And I also just think that the mechanisms that the Mountain West has used to try and keep its conference together, while admirable, are just a little too strong, I guess. Conferences dying, conference realignments. That's just kind of the way things happen. Um, but I respect the Mountain West and I respect Gloria Nevarez for doing everything she can to keep the conference together. And obviously, I want UNLV to just be in the Pac-12 anyway, because I don't think that we belong in the Mountain West, and I don't really like the mechanism that kept us in the Mountain West. Maybe our university president, who was the chairman of the board of the Mountain West, him being gone, he resigned a few months ago. Maybe that'll change things for us, but ultimately mediation, there's going to have to be some creative thinking to solve this issue because the math just doesn't quite work. So guys, that's everything for the video today. I do hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will leave me your comments. I want you, especially if there are any lawyers watching, I know there's a few. Leave me your comments, leave me your opinions, leave me your thoughts. I want to know them. I want to know what you guys think. I want to know if you think that my predictions or analysis of the legal debate is fair or not. And let's run. Oh, and please subscribe and please like this video and please subscribe to the channel because I'm really enjoying watching this grow. Let's run.